So have you ever lived in a house and wondered, is this what's making me sick? Like, is my home environment what's making me sick? If you have, join the club. I lived in a space that was absolutely stunning, and I slowly got more and more sick. I got digestive issues, I had mental health issues, I was anxious all the time, I was experiencing fatigue, I just wasn't myself. I followed my intuition with the space, and it had a basement, and I finally checked the basement and it was completely covered in mold. As soon as I moved out of that space, my life changed. Healing was so much easier for me. And that's kind of where I started to learn all about mold and mold illness and kind of mycotoxin illness, I guess, and how it affects us so much. So this video is going to be all about if you have an intuition that your space is moldy, how to test it and what to do. I'm not going to go deep into like healing from mold because that would make this video very, very long. But I will talk about how to tell if your mold is, or if your home is moldy and what to do about it. This video is going to be all about finding mold in your home. Fun topic. If you're anything like me and you've heard about mold and mycotoxin illness and been like, is this what's making me anxious, or, making my digestive issues stronger, or making me depressed, or all the other symptoms that come with mold, from sinus issues to mental health issues like I mentioned, to chronic fatigue, anxiety, skin issues even, there's tons of them. So I highly recommend checking your home to see if it's coming from where you live, because a lot of the times statistically we are living in a house with water damage, and when it's not remediated properly, it can grow mold, and that mold can produce mycotoxins, and those mycotoxins can make us sick. So I'm a big fan of looking at our home environment and making sure it is the healthiest that we could possibly get it, and this video is going to be all about that. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to do it on a budget, and we're going to talk about how to do the most expensive things that you can possibly do too, because we all are in different financial situations, and sometimes it's hard to even think, like maybe you're renting, so, and you don't want to move. So what can you do? What's cheap? What's a cheap way to test? So we're going to talk about all those different options, and all of them are great. So the first mold test we'll talk about is called Immunolytics. And these are basically little petri dishes that you buy, and you can set them out for, I believe it's an hour, and then you close them up and then you send them off to a lab, and they'll test to see what type of mycotoxins landed on the petri dish in whatever room you tested. So you would test each room that you were curious about it having mold. So maybe it was your bathroom or your basement or your bedroom, and it will let you know whether that space is like safe or not. If you do go this route, make sure that you do shut your windows so that there isn't a ton of fresh air coming in. You want to get it like as dank and as stale as possible to really test the air quality. And you also might want to like kind of kick up some dust before you set the petri dish out, just because sometimes the mycotoxins can settle. So you want to make sure you get them into the petri dish if you follow this route. I really love these petri dishes because if you work somewhere and you're curious about whether your work is getting you sick, you can also very easily take the petri dish to work and set it out and see, like maybe your office building is moldy. I've personally worked in a couple moldy places, and I tested them and I was like, I can't work here anymore. Like I'm spending 8 hours a day here. So it's good to know. And even if you do, like say you can't change your job, then you would know like, oh, when I leave work, I'm going to take a bunch of binders just to help my body deal with the mold that it was just exposed to. So Immunolytics is a great option. Don't quote me on the price, but I think it's under $50 per petri dish, like maybe even around $30. So it's a very cost-effective way to, test your space. Say you were renting and you tested with Immunolytics labs and you can't possibly move. There are things that you can do to, you can't possibly remediate mold, because that would take you like that would mean you're taking down drywall and taking out insulation. We can't really do that in buildings that we're renting, but you can start cleaning with Benefect often, and you could maybe even invest in an air purifier that's mold specific, like Air Oasis. Okay, so the mid-range thing that you could do to test your space is called an ERMI test. And this is gonna be testing the settled dust in different areas. And you will take little swipes of that dust and send it into a lab. And then again, the lab will tell you if there's mold in your space and if your space is livable due to that mold. Again, in terms of remediation, like I always say, always get an expert to remediate it. If you own your home, just spend the money remediating it, especially if you want to live in that house for a long time. Or, you know, if you're going to sell it soon, not have the guilt of making other people sick, just because mold is highly carcinogenic and it does make people sick. So you want to spend the money to remediate it. If you're renting, again, same thing applies. If you do the ERMI test and for whatever reason you want to stay in that space, you can get a mold specific air purifier and clean everything with Benefect always. Okay, so the third and most expensive thing that you could do is get a building biologist into your house to do a full assessment. The benefit of this is that it's the most accurate, and they're also going to give you a quote for remediation. It's the most expensive. Like just having someone come in and test takes about 8 hours, and that usually costs like $2,000. The plus side of that money is they're also going to test for VOCs, which is really interesting because again, those can make you sick, and they may even test EMF radiation of your home and then maybe suggest different things that you could do to lower your EMF. We know that if your house particularly has a lot of EMFs in it and had water damage or any slight bit of mold, the EMFs or the Wi-Fi signals will make the mold grow tenfold, like an insane amount, whether it's in your body or just on the walls. Like for whatever reason, mold grows insanely fast with Wi-Fi signal. So that's an important thing to note. They will do like a full assessment, and then they'll obviously give you a quote to remediate it. And it's interesting to have them in your house because you learn a lot. A cool thing about building biologists too, if you ever want to build your own home, is you can use them as like for consult, and they'll help you build like the most healthy home that you could possibly have. Yeah, toxins are not fun. Okay, so maybe you're wondering, like, how do I know if I even need to buy these tests? Like, I don't see mold, so why would I do it? First, I'll say a lot of mold issues you actually can't see. They're in behind drywall, and your house could look totally normal. It could even be a new build. So there's no specific type of house that's more prone to mold. It doesn't necessarily even have to be in the basement. Sometimes people do additions on houses, or with new builds, they don't build them properly or use different material, or maybe it rains on the building like halfway through and they're building it, and then they slap a roof off and on it and cover everything up, and then it gets moldy. So if you're wondering if your house is moldy, I would say follow your intuition with that, because our bodies are very sensitive to mycotoxins, and I think it's better to just know and feel safe rather than get more and more sick. The more we are in moldy environments, the harder it is to heal from, and the longer it will take to detox mold because the biofilms that they create. I think another thing sometimes people say is like, well, I live with another person in the house and they don't seem to be really sick. One thing I'll say to that is there are genetic differences in people. So some people are more prone to genetically not be able to handle mold or have an intense inflammatory response from mold that could hit any symptom, any like system in the body. So just because everybody's not sick doesn't mean that mold's not there. Some people detox mold pretty quickly, pretty easily, even if they're living in a moldy space. So if you have some health issues and you've tried seeing different people and nothing really seems to be helping, I highly recommend looking at your environment. looking at your home and seeing if that's what's making you sick, because it is really difficult to heal when we are in an environment that's toxic to us. I know it's hard to hear because the idea of leaving our home or potentially leaving our workplace is a lot for a lot of us, and that's like a privilege. But it is also knowledge is power. It's better to know if that space is making you sick, because then you can do everything in your power to help your body be resilient to that.